Okay. Right. So we're going to have a talk about product marketing fit. Okay. Everybody can see that. Just double check it's still going. No problems from your point of view, Roman. You can see it okay?
Yeah, all good.
All good. Okay. So in the information about this particular course, this is what was sent out basically. So it's designed for early stage founders and aspiring entrepreneurs, and basically the idea is to try and give some steer as to how you plan for success, by aligning whatever you're thinking of, the product or service or the market offering, with real market demand. And so we're going to have a look at that, and we're going to look at a process about how you go to market, and we're going to see how we start to think about our marketing plan or our business plan and our product development plan in a little bit more detail. There's going to be a fair few opportunities to ask questions as well, and Ruma's going to help me with that, because you can put questions into chat, and then when we come to those moments, we can then discuss or answer the questions that you have. So hopefully you'll get a lot out of this in the next sort of hour and a bit as we go through it. So running order is, I'm going to start with some basic theory, go-to-market modeling, and how you determine a market offering, looking at the marketplace, the needs and wants, who your customers are, segmentation, ideal customer profile, which is a tool for identifying and describing your customer, market targeting, differentiation and positioning, and what you might need to remember as you move forward. So hopefully going to be interesting bit of time together. So the go-to-market model and your market offering. This is a standard model. It's a virtuous circle. What I mean by that is the market offering is obviously what you're thinking of doing, and what you have to do in order to make that real, make that successful, is understand the marketplace you're going to try and sell your market offering into. And the way that you do that is by looking at the market in a bit more detail, which is what segmentation is about. You have to prioritize, of all the places or all the people or all the routes to selling your products and services are the most likely to be successful, and prioritize those. And you need to work out how you're going to differentiate yourself from everybody else, because let's be clear, the market is not uncrowded. There's lots and lots of companies, businesses, entrepreneurs out there doing their thing, and obviously you're going to compete with them in the particular space that you exist in. And as you go through this process, the idea of the virtuous circle is you might go back and think about the market offering and change it, because you've learned more about the market, you've learned more about what particular customers want and need, you've decided that there's a certain level of priority in certain parts, and you've also thought about how you differentiate and position yourself, your business, from everybody else. So market offering, what is it? Well, it's, in very simple terms, it's what product, service, or solution are you intending to sell, right? In a nutshell, what are you proposing to do? And the point is, it can be something that you're passionate about, right? It doesn't have to be, a serious thing in that sense. It can be something that's driven by experience. It could be your experience personally, or it could be somebody that you know. It can be something you've thought about. You think, well, I can do better. I can do much better than what's already out there. And maybe it's something that's brand new. Maybe you've identified stuff that's going on in the world, the pain points that you see other people experiencing, and what you're going to do is going to make those things better, or even better still, make them go away. Now, in terms of history, if we go back, there's all sorts of products that we take for granted today. And at the time, it's funny that they were revolutionary. People couldn't believe it, what they were seeing. And so I thought we're going to play a little game just to get us going, which is, can you guess the year? Okay, so I'm not going to ask you to shout them out. I want you just to see if you get them right, and at the end we can maybe talk about that. But the first one is an old thing. This is a flat screen TV. Who'd have thought all TVs were not flat before? So a flat screen TV. When was that first produced? So write your answer down if you can, and see if you're right. And the answer is, it was in 1998, believe it or not. It's a last century product. Moving on, Apple's first smartphone. Any ideas, anybody there? Write down what you think. When was that first launched into the marketplace, the first smartphone? Well, the answer is 2007. So that's quite a long time ago, given that, nowadays everybody has a smartphone. Nobody would think twice about buying one. What about this one then? First contactless payment card. When was that? Anyone got a thought about that? Well, that was actually 2007 as well. So this kind of contactless payment card that we're now really familiar with, we wouldn't think twice about, hardly ever use cash often these days. Well, that started in 2007. First, the all-electric car that used a lithium-ion battery. And I won't give any prizes for guessing which person developed this and launched this car. Elon, obviously. When was that? Well, that was in 2008. So that's when the whole change happened in terms of motor cars moving from diesel, obviously petrol, to electric. Now, what links all of these together is the vision, the imagination, the creativity, and the passion of the founders and the entrepreneurs who created these products to change the way the world works, right? And they did. When you look at those products and you think about the impact they've had on consumers, it's been huge. And that's the challenge for you, because that's what you may be thinking about doing. And it would be great if that was true. So what I'd like you to do is to spend just a couple of minutes writing down your market offering. And what I want you to do when you write it down is it can be a sentence or two. It should be really clear what it is your business is going to do. What are you going to take to market? What are you going to make or sell or source and try and promote and convert into sales? So just for a couple of minutes, write down what your market offering is, because that will be very useful to us a little bit later on. Okay, so I'm going to assume you've got it written down, and that's good. There is a form that's in some of the document that was sent out in support of the course, which provides, it's a form to provide space for you to write this stuff down. You obviously don't need to use a form to do it. You can write it on your computer or on a piece of paper, but you can use this form if you wish to. It brings together all this information in one page. Okay, moving on, marketplace needs and wants. To know what's going on in the marketplace, you need to understand what's going on with consumers and customers that you think are likely to buy your products, and why what you're doing is going to be something that is going to be interesting to them. Okay. And it's pretty obvious, right, that this is something you need to think very carefully about, because there's no point thinking you can just go and promote anything to the marketplace, because to be successful, you have to have things that people want to buy. And therefore, when you look at how do you find the answers to that, how do we know what you're doing is, or how do you know what you're doing is likely to be successful, then it's about research. It's about understanding the marketplace. It's understanding consumer behavior or customer behavior. It's understanding trends that are happening, what's changing in terms of technology, and so on. So this is a really important step, actually, for you in terms of taking the product or service that you're thinking of to market. So to be successful, you need a market offering that the marketplace wants to buy. And you need to be able to answer these questions. What are the needs and wants in the marketplace that you have identified specifically? What are they? Where's your proof that these are real? It's no good saying, oh, I have a feeling that this is true. What you should be doing is primary research if you can. Secondary research, obviously, is available in abundance. And this is where you find out whether what you're talking about doing is likely to have traction and likely to be successful. You also need to be clear, if you've identified needs and wants in the marketplace, in consumers, in customers, then your market offering needs to meet those. And so the question is how? How can you demonstrate that what you're proposing to do is going to solve some of these issues? And why do you believe you will be successful compared to other people? All right, because there's lots of people trying to be entrepreneurs, trying to launch products and services and so on. So why do you believe you will be successful? And if you can't answer these questions, then in a way, there's a moment to pause and think about what do you do to fill in the gaps? How do you move forward with a deeper, greater understanding of what's actually going on? How might you find proof? Primary research, collecting information and data through surveys, customer interviews, and focus groups. I would recommend it, depending on what you're doing, I'd recommend you talk to people that you know, socialize what you're thinking about, and ask people you know what they think. Would they buy the product? Why would that work? What's their opinion? What's their experience? It's really, really helpful to get direct feedback from people. And you might well have a group of people at university, you may well have in other social groups that could help you. Clearly, secondary research is analysing published data and insight. There's a whole heap of databases, articles, journals, there's news, industry-specific opinion, all looking at what are the current trends, what's been happening in the past, what do we anticipate happening in the future. And you should absolutely be across this in the area that you're working in. And also look at trend analysis. You know, what are the predictions about from credible sources? So not just from any old person, but from credible sources. What do people think is likely to happen? You know, and therefore, you know, how are you going to take advantage of what the next steps are likely to be? So this is the market analysis that you need to do, and you need to answer this question: where's your proof? If you think you've got some really good idea and you want to make it successful, where is the proof that it's going to be? Now, in a minute, I'm going to ask you to write down your understanding of the marketplace, what problem your market offering is solving. But before we do, this is a moment where you might want to ask some questions. So does anybody have any questions they'd like to ask about what we talked about, what I've talked about so far? Has anyone put anything on chat, women?
No, not yet. If you have a question, guys, feel free to unmute yourself or save it toward the end. We have a few Q&A opportunities.
Okay, so no questions so far. I'll move on then. So what I want you to do is to write down what you think the market needs and wants. What you've written down what your market offering is, and what you now need to do is you need to actually write down, you know, why the marketplace needs what you're thinking of offering. So just spend a couple of minutes writing bullet points down as to why you think what you're thinking of doing is going to be successful.
In the meantime, there was a question if surveying 500 people is enough to study a market.
Is interviewing, did you say?
Surveys, but I guess, well, yeah, that's broad.
I think the thing is, I mean, I think that when you do a survey, one of the things you need to do is profile the people that you're going to ask questions of, and think carefully about why those particular, you know, interviewees, if you like, are relevant and to what you're what you're trying to find out. So the answer is it enough to give you a view across a very large marketplace? I think the answer is probably not. But what it can do is it can provide some quite interesting insight. As long as you've understood and profiled the people that you're interviewing, because that's really important to know whether or not, if you like, they are the likely customers that you're thinking of selling things to. For example, would that person explain what it was they were thinking of doing? Could they do that?
You want to unmute yourself and share, Ashai, or write in the chat? It's about a beverage and serving at university first, university students.
Okay. Well, I mean, the thing is, if your marketplace is university students and you want to go and interview a number of university students, then you're bang on the money, aren't you? Because what you're going to hear directly is, you know, is what they think. When you start to think about who you're going to ask the question of, right? That's where profiling comes in, because you've got to try and describe the person that you're wanting to interview. Why is this particular type of person relevant to what you're proposing to do? And the reason why you do that is because what you try and do in a survey normally is try and get a cross section of people with different profiles to give you some input, so that you have a way of comparing what the different groups of people say about this particular product. And that might be done by demographics. It could be done in terms of sex or age, or it could be based on interest, or it could be based on a variety of different characteristics that you use to describe people. So I don't think it's a bad idea personally. I think doing primary research is a good start, particularly if your product or service, whatever, in this case, is very much focused at student, university population. Any more? Is that it? Good
That seems to be all.
Okay.
Yeah.
So who are your customers? We're going to talk about a technique which is called segmentation in marketing. Who are your customers? The marketplace is huge, right? And the reason why you start thinking about trying to break the marketplace down is because, you could be talking about, your neighborhood. It could be a small, could be a town, could be like you were saying a second ago about universities, city, country, county, region, the world. The point, of course, is that everybody isn't the same. Everybody has different needs and they buy for many different reasons. So the way you try and think about taking a business or a product to market is to start to analyze customers. And this is what segmentation is all about. What it is, in simple terms, is putting customers into groups based on shared common characteristics. So here are some of the common characteristics that you can break the market down into. So we talk about demographics, which are consumer characteristics, or firmographics, which are about businesses and the way you might look at businesses differently. Psychographic, which are around the values, the interests, the lifestyles that people in the marketplace have. There might be behavioral things, habits and actions, stuff that people are doing. Or they can be very much focused on the need, this idea that there's a problem out there and we're going to solve it. So it might be that we group people together based on a shared problem and therefore a shared benefit that everybody, might look at. And there's some more information in the session workbook about this. So in a bit more detail, okay, so if you're going to look at demographics in terms of consumer characteristics, it can be obviously, where are these people? So physically, where are they? Are they based in London? Are they based in the UK? Are they based in major cities around the world? How old are they? Because age is obviously very important in determining, the attitude, as well as the spending capabilities of consumers. Lifestyle stage, where are they in their journey? What's their gender? What's their income? If they have a job, what is it? If they've been educated, where were they educated? Maybe religion, maybe ethnicity, maybe the generation they belong to. So the idea, of course, is if demographics are important in thinking about your product, what you're going to try and do is to break down the market into very specific groups. And you can do that, when you do that, what you do is you create a segment, and you will likely have multiple segments, a number of different groups in the marketplace that might be interested in buying the product or service from you. Now, if you look at the list there for business characteristics, you can see a very different set of things, right? Because, the business type, what kind of business is it? What is the core business activity? What sector do they work in? Where are they located? What's the business structure? Are they limited companies? Are they, founded companies? Are they international businesses? That kind of thing. And what you see, turnover, number of employees, all these things are trying to build a picture about what the particular companies that you might be interested in selling to look like as a grouping. Psychographic is, what values do they have that match your brand ethos, and are directly related to the products and services that you offer. So it's about the values and interests of customers and consumers. Or it might be about their behavior. It might be about their social habits, their leisure activities, their interests and pursuits, the kind of lifestyle attributes that they might have. And so we go to the final one, which is the need, which is a pretty simple construct, which is, what is the issue or problem they have that you are going to solve? So the point about this is that what you do is you've started out writing, what you're going to sell or produce in terms of your market offering. You've thought a little bit about, sort of the marketplace and what your understanding of that might be. And now you start to break the marketplace down into segments, which is a group of potential customers that you personally think might be of interest, might be the kind of people who will buy your product. But the point is, it's not just enough to say a group of people. What you need to do is to bring that group of people to life, to start to identify the characteristics that bring all of those people together. And the reason why you do this is because when you start to think about doing marketing, so whether it's social media stuff or whether it's direct marketing or advertising or whatever activity is coming along in the pipeline, clearly, if you've got a group of people who are all sort of thinking the same, all motivated by the same things, then you're able to produce communication that reaches them, that means something to that group of people. And of course, what you might say to a segment one, could be very, very different to what you might say in segment two, because the segment two group of people are really quite distinct and different, completely thinking differently to the segment one. So this is why you do it, because it makes it possible to produce meaningful communication in the future. Does anybody have any questions about segmentation? Does it make sense? Do you get how it works? If anyone wants to unmute and ask a question, please do. Quiet bunch tonight.
Nothing so far. Thank you. I'm happy.
Okay. So the exercise 3 really was to start to think about how you might flesh out segments. So you've got the marketplace. The marketplace can be very large, obviously. Pick part of the marketplace and start to think about the characteristics that you can identify to describe that piece of the marketplace and why it's relevant to you. Obviously, I can't tell whether anyone's doing anything here. Rumors will just carry on, or what do you think? You think people are doing this?
Guys, are you writing this down? Maybe you already figured it out. Why don't you give us a little bit of feedback? Do you need more time? Or maybe share in chat some of the segments you identified or you're thinking of identifying. So we can do this as a little bit more of a podcast. So one is writing, another one wants to create their own couture brand, and they're asking how they could target the wealthy clientele, so like the premium sector. Another one is saying that they're targeting, so that was the student with the drinks, university students and working professionals.
So if you think if you start to draw out what your a segment looks like, then you start to think about the kind of people that that live in that segment, the kind of things that they do, the kind of motivations they have, the kind of money that they may have to spend in terms of discretionary spend, that kind of thing. And of course, that's the point, is that all of that is about trying to get yourself into the mind of the customer that you're going to try and sell to, so you can understand what you might tell them. What would you say about your product that is going to be, interesting and compelling to that particular audience? And the point, of course, is that what you might say about your product to one audience could be quite different to another. So if you talk about, relatively high net worth, professionals compared to university students, the product actually could be the same, but what you would say about your product would be really very different because the audience that you're talking to is very different. Okay, moving on. Obviously, the form that I showed you earlier on, this part here is where you might start to identify market segments. Now, when you've done a bit of research on this, you've understood the marketplace, you've started to think about segments and breaking the market down, then this is where you start to create what's called, in marketing terms, an ideal customer profile, an ICP, which summarizes the characteristics of your target customers. So what it is it includes some of the stuff I've just talked to you about. So it's about, the demographics and all of that stuff. It's a unique proposition, what you offer, the reason for purchase, meaning why they would buy it, why the customer would buy it or consumer would buy it from you, the pricing that you would be selling it to them, including the competition that you are going to be competing against. So, if you're producing product X and product X already exists in some form or other, which is extremely likely, then who sells it? What's the price point for them? So you have a very clear understanding of where you sit in the marketplace. And then, of course, what that then leads you to go on to do is to think about how you make your marketing approach distinctive. What are the messages that you want to communicate to your target customer? What's the call to action? Meaning, what are you going to ask them to do? What are you going to ask them to think about and feel about your product or services? And of course, also, when you think about it, the channel that you might use to reach that particular target customer is also going to be very much determined by the kind of person they are and what their behavior is and what their social media profile might be and the kind of tools that they might use. There is an ICP template in your workbook. And basically it's a Word document. So if you've been writing stuff down, or at least followed what I've been talking about, then you could use the various parts that we've spoken about already to start to draw out what your ideal customer profile would look like for the different customers or clients that you are planning on selling to. Okay, market targeting. I'll explain what it is. It's one of the 4 P's of marketing. It's where to prioritize. It's about which segment's going to go first. So if you have identified them, you've looked at the marketplace, you thought, well, there could be maybe 2 or 3 different routes to selling what I'm doing. You need to then work out in terms of those individual routes, which one will generate the greatest customer value. In other words, which one will you make the most money out of? Which one will be the easiest to reach? Which one will be the least expensive when it comes to marketing spend and effort trying to reach them? Because clearly, when you think about it, if you identify a marketplace that you think is of interest, you think that it's relatively easy to reach them and you think you'll make a good amount of money from that type of customer, then it makes a lot of sense to start by prioritizing that group of people rather than some other group that might be more difficult for you to reach. And that is an exercise that you can come back to on a regular basis, but I'm not going to go into it in any more detail today. The next area really is around differentiation and positioning. So this is about how consumer personas drive comms. And the point, of course, is that you need to be able to differentiate your products and services from everybody else, okay? And the customer or consumers need to understand why they're different. And you need to give them reasons to buy from you, okay? And one of the ways you can do that is start to try and imagine, in real life, who your customer is. so that you can think about what you might say to them, how you might market to them, how you might reach them. So personas are quite a useful thing, really, because you can imagine a person, a real person, obviously in this case taken from a image library. What it is, it's a kind of semi-fictional description, you know, of a customer group. And the idea is you try and make it much more personal, much bring it to life, you know, make it meaningful and impactful in terms of, you know, the way that you describe somebody. Because when it comes to writing, you know, communication or doing ads or doing social media, if you have in your mind's eye somebody in you know, real and tangible that you are communicating with, it's a lot easier to produce information or produce communication than trying to do something bland or somewhat, you know, business-like and so on. So a persona is really good. You can give your persona a name. You describe their character and their behavior. You know, what are they like as people? You know, maybe have the photograph that represents them or several photographs that represent who this persona actually represents. You know, describe what motivates them. You know, what is it that makes them tick? You know, what is it about what you're doing that they're going to be interested in? You know, how are they going to feel about what you're doing? What do they want to buy, and why do they want to buy it? You know, what are the reasons that they're going to buy it? Okay, because when it comes to communication, when we talk about a call to action, what that actually is in real terms is a reason to click and sign up to something, or a reason to buy or try a product. And explain why your market offer meets their needs. So this is all the information that you might include in a persona. And the idea of it is to try and bring to life, try and make something a little bit more accessible for everybody, to be able to then communicate and promote what you're doing. So the next step is to get you to think about your persona, what that might look like based on what you've been doing so far. But as I mentioned earlier at the beginning, you know, have you got any questions? Do you have any questions about how a persona works and or how you go about creating one? Just unmute yourself if you've got a question. Okay, so this is really a moment for you to actually get some of that work done. I wondered whether any of you could share what you're thinking at this point. Okay. So we're kind of getting towards the end in terms of this process. So we talked about the market offering, we talked about the marketplace, we talked about how we analyze the marketplace in terms of segmentation. That might lead us to start to think about, you know, a persona. It might start to think about our ideal customer profile. We think about the priority. Where are we going to start? Where are we going to put our effort, maybe some money into promoting what we're doing? And as we do that, we start to think about how are we going to differentiate ourselves from our competitors in the marketplace and position what we're doing, the products and services that we are producing, so they are attractive to the market segments that we're most interested in. So things to focus on in this is to be clear what your market offering is. Make sure you properly research and understand the marketplace, you know, and that you make sure there is demand for what you're doing. Understand who your customers will be. Break the market down so that you understand the characteristics of the different groups. Work out how your market offering is differentiated from your competitors. Work out how to position your products and services so they're attractive. Maybe using personas to help you create marketing communication, you know, that's engaging for a specific audience. You know, later decide who to target first, and then revisit and revise your approach. So what the go-to-market model is a standard tool used in marketing, and it's designed really to enable. It's a framework to help an entrepreneur or a business, to work through a process of taking a product or service to market. And the thing about the model is it doesn't really matter what the product or service is, because the process is actually the same thing. So this screen just recaps some of the bits and pieces that we have spoken about, and is included in the takeaway document that we mentioned earlier. So that's it. You've been very quiet this evening. I'm quite surprised. Does anyone have any questions? Would you like to talk about an aspect of marketing in terms of how you might want to take your product or service to market?
Tony, sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a question in the chat from someone called Ahashe, and their question is, I want to know if investors do consider Berkus method of evaluating a company in practice, or if there are any other methods they apply.
What was to say that again, please?
They want to know if the investors consider Berkus method of evaluating a company in practice, or if there are any other methods that they apply for pre-seed or pre-revenue companies.
Well, I think if you, in terms of evaluating your business idea, what they're expecting you to do is to have a very detailed plan that explains how you're going to move the product or service, whatever it is, take it to market from the pre-seed stage or the bootstrap stage that you're in at the moment to the next stage. So the point about that is, what investors want is they want you to help them to minimize risk, right? In terms of one of the biggest things that's going on here. If you're asking somebody for money, then obviously they're not going to want to consider it if they don't think you've thought about the market properly, that you don't really understand it, if you haven't really thought about the financial model and what your investment requirements are and what you're going to spend money on. So in terms of them, they will evaluate your understanding of the marketplace, understand whether they think the product works effectively. They'll understand how you intend to take it to market, how you're going to source various materials or whatever that may be required to do it. They're going to want to know that you have a very good financial mind and understand the finances of what you're proposing, because let's be clear, if you don't, then it's going to become clear very quickly that you don't, and that's not going to impress an investor. So when you're thinking about this, there isn't a model that they will look at, and people talk about EBIT, data and so on as a methodology, but it's really about having the package of the go-to-market package that explains confidently why investing in your idea is likely to bring a financial return. I think the other thing I would say, though, of course, remember, is that there's different types of investors, right? So, not everybody comes at this from the same perspective. I think if you're thinking about angel investors, very often you might say that what distinguishes an angel investor is the fact that they have a personal interest in trying to make something happen that might well be of benefit to the community or the wider world and so on, and therefore they're looking at innovative ways of achieving that goal, whereas perhaps other investors are less interested in that and more interested in whether there is demonstratively evidence of traction, that you're making progress, that stuff is happening, and therefore the likelihood of it not being successful is fading, and that's something also to take into consideration. I don't know if that answers the question, though. Does that answer your question?
I'll ask the student. It was a student's question.
Okay.
Yeah, good to go.
Okay. Anyone else?
Yeah, there is another question in the chat, and they're asking if another company already offers a similar idea to their idea, how can they stand out?
Well, okay. So if in most cases, right, when you think about it, I gave for fun, gave you a couple of examples of things which are really quite new. and they were at the time were revolutionary in a sense, in their own way, not necessarily very exciting in a way, but the point is, most of the time you will inevitably compete with other companies who are in the same kind of space, as you, and therefore you've got to understand, what those companies are doing, what are they doing well, and what aren't they doing that well, what is good about their products, and what is better about your products, right? Or your approach to taking products to market, because that's crucial. When imagine you've got your potential customers, sitting in front of you, and they say, okay, tell me what it is, about you and your product that, I should be interested in. Why should I be considering it? And of course, that's the point. That is exactly the point where you can differentiate, from them. There's also a point here about brand, which we haven't really spoken about brand, but I mean, I was in a workshop and with somebody who was making designer handbags using recycled materials. Okay, and their view of the world was, the question they had was, well, how do I compete with major brands like, I don't know, Dior or others in that kind of luxury space? And of course, the answer is you can't, because they are mega brands and they have huge resources and all the rest of it. But that does not mean you can't be successful, because what you're doing in that example is, you're working in a way which is ethically. What you're doing is something which is extremely relevant to a large percentage of the population, and what you're designing, it looks great. And so does it mean you can't be successful, even though there are plenty of high street shops that producing, in her case, handbags, all over London? Does that mean she can't be successful? No, it doesn't. But I think you need to have the narrative. I think you need to be able to explain why what you're doing is better. What is it? Why is it exciting? Why is it relevant? Why is it the right approach? In terms of what's happening in the world at the moment, than other people who are in the same space as you. If you do, I would recommend, I don't know if what you're thinking of doing, but if you could identify other companies that you think look like you in a way, then that's really super useful, because you can start to look at the web stuff that they're doing, look at whether they're doing blogging or whether they're doing social media posts, look at what they say on their website, that kind of thing, because it's really instructive from your point of view, to listen very carefully to the way they talk about their products and services, because that will help you try and find a niche that and allows you to get what you're doing to stand out differently, from what they're doing.
Great, thank you very much. There's one more question which I missed earlier, which is from a student. So can you recommend tools for market research for legal industry or consulting?
Well, I mean, some of the tools, I could maybe come back to you on that, because I mean, some of the database stuff I use is in software tools like Fame, and so on. But there are a variety of tools. So, for example, that will do business profiling really well, if you know what I mean. So you'd be able to start to analyze the number of companies that fall into into a particular space. Would you say legal? Was that the question?
Yes, legal.
Yeah. So clearly, in terms of, if it's UK particularly, then what you would have with Fame is you would be able to produce an analysis of every legal practice in the country, and you'd be able to break that down in terms of the number of practitioners, how many lawyers do they each employ, how many employees do they have, where are they based, how many offices do they have, those kind of things. And the point, of course, is what you're building is a profile around the legal profession, and also where it's based as well. So the point being, perhaps what you would do then is start to think about how you position whatever legal product or service you're thinking of in a most appropriate way, and target different parts of that organization. So that would be one, but I could probably come up with a few that, if you like, and suggest them through Rumen, if you like.
Thank you. The question was from me. I just wanted to quickly follow up on your comment. When it comes to doing research on businesses about the statistics, how do you find through Fame? How do you find the number of practitioners and things like that?
Well, there's a way of searching the database so that you can basically you basically go through it. It's kind of a bit of a manual process, but you go through it and you basically identify the criteria that are relevant to you, and then it goes away and produces data.
Thank you. I have another question. So when I failed recently trying to launch a new product. Basically, it was a language learning platform, and I wanted to know, how do you mitigate risks when it comes to your budget for launching a new product? What would be the line you have to draw when you plan on experimenting or something like that? I felt I burned money now trying to specifically look for one market instead of expanding or trying on a few different markets at the same time. So that was one of the things, like, what would you do to mitigate risk when it comes to go-to-market strategy?
When you, I mean, this sounds rather trite, and I don't mean it to be at all. There is a question really about what is driving your thinking. Do you know, in terms of your product development? Are you doing what you're doing because you've identified the market is moving in the direction that you are going, which is, is called outside in thinking, isn't it, in marketing terms? Or are you an enthusiast who's come up with something and thinks this could be really brilliant, and then is in the position where you're thinking, okay, well, I'm making some moves here, but it's not really happening, and therefore I'm going to have to invest money in making this thing happen because I really believe in it. Do you have a view about your approach when you talk about that product that didn't work? Do you think you were more meeting a recognized need, or more of an enthusiast, promoting something you believed in?
I did a trial, and the trial went really well, and I wanted to kind of scale up. So I set a budget of about £300 a week for running the campaigns, but it did not go as planned. And I tried for a whole month, or maybe just over a month. And at some point I realized that I will not get the customers I'm seeking, so I have to stop. But I did not realize where or how to, find or point out the risks when it comes to launching. So this was for a language learning online course, right? So I had that as a trial where we had quite a few number of students who signed up, and the market was in India.
Right.
This was specifically for IELTS, and so it did not go as planned. And I put in some money for the campaigns, but I was unsuccessful. So now I'm thinking whether I went wrong with the branding or something else. So,
well, okay. So if you were to follow the process, I don't know. I'm going to make a guess that you didn't follow the process I've tried to explain this evening on this webinar.
No.
So okay. So I think the starting point, in a sense, the problem with the trial, right, is who you pick, right? Who is it? Who do these people represent? Now, if you were to go away again, looking at what you did, and you come back with a clear understanding of why the marketplace has a need for what you did, right? And then you start thinking about that marketplace. I mean, we're talking about a global marketplace in this particular instance, maybe, but we start thinking about that marketplace. in and breaking it down into much smaller groups, because you can't just talk about the world and everybody, right? Because it's impossible. Because of course, what motivates people, I don't mean everybody, but what I mean is, groups of people are motivated by very similar things, right? Which is why marketing works, in a broadcast sense, in a social media sense. So if you start thinking about then your marketplace and who was it in the marketplace you had thought was going to be the ideal customer for what you were doing, your testing should have reflected those segments, those groups that you've identified, in order for you to be able to assess whether or not what you were hoping was going to happen, the outcome of this trial, was actually what was actually achieved, and that the learnings that you got from it in terms of the user experience, the benefit of the tool, and so on and so forth, was what you expected it to be. Now, you could have invested a bit of money in conducting that research rather than promoting the product, right? And you may have learned as a consequence of that, some very interesting, insightful things about it that would have then helped you go to the next stage, which is where you might have adapted what you did. You might have recognized that some segments weren't really interested in it, particularly, and that you needed to modify your approach accordingly. Does that make sense to you?
It does, thank you. What would be the pool size? Like if I'm looking at an audience pool, what should be the ideal pool size, let's say, for an online campaign?
Well, tell me, is this product something that do you have a sense of scale in terms of what the market for this product might be?
I did a trial, and our team was able to have about 20 participants, which was
Right.
really good number to have a trial. And we expected 100 for the next one. So the whole idea was to see that we have a good budget for marketing, and then we have a bigger number of audience, but it did not go as planned. And Facebook expects to have, I think, 50 conversions for reaching the algorithms requirement. So we did not do enough conversions, and we just spent money. We just burnt money. So it didn't go as planned at all.
Yeah. Well, I think I think I don't think there's a magic number in terms of it, but I do think you've got to 20 isn't enough, is it? For obvious reasons. So you need a lot more in terms of that. But your tactics could be different. I think in terms of, if you've got something that you want people to trial, then the whole way you communicate about it and how you might incentivize people to engage with you could be very different than trying to get people to buy it, if you know what I mean. So the whole relationship you might have with them could be different if what you're trying to do is get people engaged and interested and willing to give you some time, even maybe for money, actually, to try to to understand, for you to try to understand what their experience and their opinion was. In terms of the actual research, the thing about it also is how that was structured, because like I said to you, if you've identified a particular type of customer that you think is spot on, then that leads you, therefore, doesn't it, in the research, to think about engaging people that fit that profile, right? And not people who don't fit that profile. And then you've got to curate that research so that you get the answers that you want, that are going to help you develop the product and take it to market. And it's not just a do you think it's okay kind of conversation, is it? It's more than that. So I kind of think probably you need to be really in the hundreds if you're going to meaningfully learn about the segments that you've defined, the kind of the market that you're interested in. But I do think there might be a few cool ways of engaging and getting people to offer to help. Do you know?
Oh, this was very insightful. Thank you very much.
Okay. Anyone else?
So last chance to pick Tony's brains. Otherwise, we are done with the workshop content delivered. So pretty much in Q&A right now, and therefore the attendance form is in the chat. Please fill it out to get marked as attended for the session on your record. And last chance for any questions for Tony. Otherwise, I'll just do a close. Any questions about market research, marketing broadly? Okay, well, let me. Okay, that's a good question, and it's actually quite relevant to you, Tony. What does a great pitch deck look like to you? The pitch DNA.
What does it look like?
Yes.
Well, I mean, the context of pitching, right, is I always say, first of all, there's obviously you need to know what you're talking about. So you need to have thought about what your product is or your service is and all the rest of it. But the key thing really starts with the audience you're trying to communicate with, doesn't it? Because I think quite often people go around this kind of back to front, which is that they have a pitch deck and they're going to use it, right? And that's how it's going to be. And I always might say to my clients, look, let's start with who you're talking to, and what is it that we need to tell them? What do we need to communicate about what you're doing? Because that's really what matters most. And bear in mind, I work with a lot of different people. So some are like lawyers, and some are accountants, and some are techie, and they're involved in stuff like fintech or med tech or something like that. And the thing is that draws them all together, right, is the fact that they're really clever people. They know what they're doing and they are smart. But the problem, and the reason they ask me for help, is because the people they sell to are not clever in the same way. They're not technical people. They're not the same lawyers, or they're not the same developers or whatever. And the point, of course, is that that's exactly as you'd expect, isn't it? Because you're pitching to the MD of a firm, or you're pitching to a CEO, you're pitching to somebody else, an investor, right? And what they don't share the same level of expertise. So what you've got to do is you've got to find a way of bringing the value of what you do to life for people who don't have the same level of technical expertise that you have, right? And so that's why a great pitch deck starts with the audience. What is it that we need to tell the audience that's going to get them interested and excited about what we're doing? And it all flows from that. And I also advocate, storytelling, I suppose. But when it comes to, I think I don't know. I don't know the people on the call, obviously, but I'm going to imagine, right, that if you put you in a room and said to you, tell me everything about your business idea and why you think it's going to work or whatever it is, there's an awful lot of time would be spent with you telling me all about it, right? And that is common to all the clients I work with. But of course, you don't get given that time. No investor, no potential customer, no consumer is going to give you ages and ages to talk about what what you're passionate about. So therefore, what you have to do is work out, therefore, what to cover. What are of all the things you could talk about, what are the things that you are going to talk about that's relevant to that particular person? And then as you curate that story, if you like, that is your presentation. And what you're then looking at is finding ways of making it accessible, making it easy to understand, using language that isn't full of acronyms and jargon and stuff like that. So it's accessible. And also thinking, about how you speak and how you talk about the products and services that you have. So in my view, the perfect pitch is something which is very, very tightly curated for a specific audience, that contains content that tells them things they don't know, not things that they already knew, that's provided in a contextual way, and that is compelling, therefore, because it's leading that customer on a journey where at the end of this pitch, the answer, right? The answer is yes. Yes, I either want to know more, or I want to have a conversation with you about it, or I want to buy it. That's my answer anyway.
Thanks so much for the answer. Another question that I had was essentially I have to make two pitch decks, one for the investors and one for the distributors. So should I try and make that pitch deck myself, or should I get like a paid professional aid?
Well, I don't know your skills in terms of the way it's going to look and feel. My expectation is, right, you would know what would go into a pitch deck, right, for a
Right.
distributor versus an investor. But in terms of making it look nice, I mean, AI tools are quite good at doing that these days. There's a fair amount of other tools around that make things look interesting. So I think I personally think I would go down that route. The key thing is knowing what to talk about, right?
hmm
Is the key thing, because the two audiences you've described, right, are going to look at what you're doing from completely different places, aren't they?
Yeah.
So although some of the content obviously will be the same, or driven, from the same heart, if you like,
hmm
what you're going to talk about, what it means, what's the value of it, what's the commercials of it, totally different.
Hmm. Yeah, no, the thing is, I have never done this before. I'm a first timer, a rookie.
Right.
So I mean, obviously I don't want to jeopardize you know, my chance of pitching to that investor or distributor. Uh so is it sort of beneficial for me to sort of make some mistakes here, or sort of outsource this stuff? Because I I mean, again, it's a big commitment, and the guys I'm pitching to, they are essentially industry leaders, and I've gotten this one-time opportunity. So I don't know exactly what to do.
Well, okay. So I think if in terms of the thinking side of it, I don't think there's anything wrong with involving other people in helping you clarify how you're going to do this. What are you
Mhm.
going to talk about, and why is that relevant? In a way, you see, what you need to do is you need to put yourself, if you like, in the head of the person, the distributor, right, or
Mhm.
the investor, and try and imagine what it is they're going to be thinking when you're talking about what you're doing.
Mm.
What That's the point. Now the thing, of course, is some of the things you might consider are in terms of the space you're in, how much will they already know about
Mhm.
it? So therefore, how much time am I going to spend banging on about stuff they already know, when
Mhm.
I maybe want to talk about things which are really important? And some of the things that might be really important are these things where you differentiate from other competitors, right?
Mhm.
Because you've got leverage. What you've done is you come up with something which is maybe not unique, but certainly different, and that's really, really crucial. There may be a model that's underneath or underpins your business financially that's really
Mhm.
interesting. I don't know anything about your business, but the point is, whatever these things are, you've got to look at this and think, okay, if I'm standing in front of someone from a distributor, with the distributor hat on, what are the things going to be that they are most interested or concerned about when I talk to them? What am I going to
Okay.
have to tell them about what I'm doing, and to demonstrate that we could have a really useful, lucrative relationship, right? And
Yeah.
that's really your starting point.
No, understandable.
I think.
No, thank
But
you.
in
Thank you
terms
so much for the insight.
No, and I think in terms of the look and feel of stuff, I wouldn't be too concerned about it. I mean, people get funny about, some people think, just to use imagery. Some people don't put loads of content on slides and stuff like that. I think, I don't know. There is a point, but I think, having a very clear narrative should lead you to determine how many slides you think you're going to need, and what are they going to say, and what are they going to say that are going to help you. I mean, when you think about, if you're talking about a presentation, right, and you've got somebody in front of you, there's only two senses, right, really, that they're going to use. One of them is they're going to read what is on the screen, and the other thing is they're going to listen to what it is you're going to say, right? So my advice to you on that is don't say what's on the screen. What you've got to do is use the screen to communicate key messages, the value of what you're doing, why what you're doing has competitive advantages, why it's got traction, or it's going to be successful, or why it's being driven by meaningful research, right? That kind of thing is really what you're really focusing in the mind of an individual watching you, right? Is the kind of the logical mind, the objective mind, because what the person sitting in front of you is doing is reading the information and taking it in. Meanwhile, what you're doing when you're speaking is bringing it to life, having some passion, talking about some of the elements of it that make it interesting. And the two is the combination of the two that I think makes a good presentation, or makes a good presenter.
Right.
Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, that definitely does make sense. Thank you so much.
We do have time for another question if there's anyone. But while you're thinking, Tony, if you don't mind, if you stop sharing, or I think if I start, it should just take over. Just lastly, to remind once again about the Pioneer Bursary, right? So if you're already registered on the program, you have already gotten an email. And just click on the link, fill out the form. No need to rush it, because you have until the 20th of November. That's a bit less than 3 weeks from now. And then the mixer itself is on the 26th, when the bursary is awarded, if you're selected. And if you haven't registered yet, westminster.ac.uk/WeNetwork.